What's up, ladies and gents? I'm Deeg. This is Deeg Thoughts. This is my weekly thoughts and discussion show here on Twitch. Today is a hot day in the Pacific Northwest of the United States where I live. And on a hot day, I thought what better time than to discuss a hot topic. So lately, I've been thinking a lot about the Burning Crusade, specifically Burning Crusade Classic. And it came out recently, and should I play it? Should I not play it? I have friends who are playing it or not with all range of opinions about it. I tweeted this out the other day. Cannot relate to the gleeful nostalgia so many seem eager to wrap themselves up in returning to Burning Crusade. Is this a generational thing? Feels like many were teenagers when Burning Crusade last rolled through. I was failing out of college. Not a pleasant wing of my memory palace. So I've been reflecting on this time of my life, and I realized it might be interesting to share and touch on a lot of concepts that have come up in the recent weeks with some of the podcast guests I've had. And also, y'all seem to like this particular picture that I shared, which is a throwback to my, here's what it says, my short-lived barbershop quartet days when I had a lot more hair and a lot less everything else. So yes, I'm going to be telling y'all about my barbershop days, short-lived though they were, and we're going to have a story. And that's the reason why. But the story begins in 2007. And what happened in 2007? Well, glad you asked. Young Deeg is in college. Having quit WoW the previous year, he sees this.
Imprisoned for 10,000 years. Banished from my own homeland. And now you dare enter my realm. You are not prepared.
I was 23 years old when I watched this for the first time. Takes me way back. Damn, girl. That's me right there, baby. Orc warrior. All right, boys and girls. Burning Crusade, the original. Holy shit. Chills. Vibes. Holy shit. So yeah, Burning Crusade came out in spring 2007. My final semester of college. So, what did I do when I saw this? Well, I did what any self-respecting orc would do. I recovered my account and grinded to 70. I don't think I started playing on opening day, but it must not have been very long after. I found this great picture of an orc warrior. This is not my warrior, but he's wearing so much of the same gear my warrior would have had at the time. The Flame Guard gauntlets from Molten Core, the Encourage shoulders. I think that's like is that like an Alterac Valley wolf? I'm not sure. I think those are the PvP boots. Anyway, mainly it's the gloves and the shoulders, I guess, that pop out at me. But this could have been me, my orc warrior. My account, after having stopped played World of Warcraft in the prior year, I shared it with an acquaintance. Because they wanted to use it. I wasn't getting anything out of it. I figured, what's the harm? Well, so after grinding my way from 60 to 70 through Outland, I log in the next day, and what happens? Banned. My ass got fucking banned. I appealed it. Of course, went nowhere. Back in those days, there's no Reddit or social media. I couldn't blow up my request. I never learned why. I asked my friend. He never answered me. My supposed friend. Anyway, best guess is he did something stupid with the account, like buy gold or something like that, and got caught up in a ban wave. I really don't know, but I do know I was still desperate to play World of Warcraft. So what did I do? I fucking re-rolled. I'm a gamer. Over the course of about 4 weeks, I grinded my way from level 1 to 70. And then when I hit to 70, I logged off because I was burned the hell out. I committed the classic gamer blunder of burning myself out on something. And I just couldn't stand to think about playing World of Warcraft anymore after leveling to 72 times. Now, I would pick up World of Warcraft again, but before it would happen, some events would transpire. So I mentioned that when WoW Burning Crusade came out, I was in my final semester of college. About to graduate, right? Very exciting. Except for me, not so much. Because for me, my college, I think of it as an experiment. Ended not with a bang, but with a whimper. After 5 years of trying to make college work across multiple schools, multiple dropouts, multiple redemptions, I dropped out at the end of the semester for the second and last time. I could do a whole other session talking about the story of my college experience, but I won't. Story for another day. Suffice it to say that many years later, I would learn that I had a little disorder called ADHD, which I think if you connect these two things together, undiagnosed ADHD and lack of success in college, I think you can paint a picture that I would broadly paint in recounting this story. In any case, so what's next? No more college. What's next for young Deeg? Like I mentioned, I'm 23 years old, if I can do the math right. So thankfully, I have a loving family to fall back on, like a lot of gamers do. While I was in college, though, my family had moved to a new town, and they were now residing in beautiful New England, northeastern part of the United States. An amazing place to be, especially if you love the outdoors and nature, which I, of course, do not. When I arrived back to live with my family, the expectation was, as anyone would expect for someone who's a post-college adult living with their family, live with your family, get back on your feet, and figure out what's next. Essentially, I became a NEET. NEET, which is a four-letter acronym, N-E-E-T, that means, I think it means not in education or employment or training. It means I wasn't doing any of the classic things you do with life when you're at that age. So let's talk about the town I was in for a second. Just to kind of paint a picture of what this life was like, how my life changed after leaving college. Like I mentioned, my family had moved while I was in college, so I was new to the town. I didn't know anyone there. I had no connections. I was an outsider. Like you can see in this picture, it's beautiful. There's a lot of nature, but not much else. This is a town whose main industry is tourism, and during the summer has roughly, I think, like 10 times the population it does during the winter. During most months of the year, this is a dead place to live, with no opportunities for young people unless you love the great outdoors. Which, like I said, I did not. I built computers. I played video games. I didn't do the outdoors. What the hell is that for? You can, I think, fairly say that large percentage of the population is made up of tourists and retirees. And like I mentioned, there weren't a lot of opportunities. So that's important because of the expectations that were kind of informally, I would say indirectly set by my family when I arrived back home to live with them. My family loves me, but they wanted me to go to church with them on Sundays and sing in the choir. I was a choir boy growing up. My mom's a choir director. For the most part, I did this with joy. I love to sing. This is part of my personality, actually, that a lot of y'all don't know about. And I grew up in the church, even though I no longer was a subscriber to it myself. I said, fine. So, young Deeg, not working, living back home after college, showing up at church, it gets pretty old pretty quick. Start to feel like a kid. What else made me feel like a kid during this time? Of course, my father wants me to pull my weight around the house, especially while I'm not working. So a lot of the home and lawn maintenance tasks begin to get doled out. Is it starting to paint a picture? Things like mowing the lawn, things like in the winter, shoveling out the driveway, things like from snow, all kinds of random crap around the house that I get to do because I'm the oldest son. And in between, trying to find a job. So what did I do? Well, actually, it turns out finding a job there is near impossible. And I didn't try that hard because I was scared out of my mind to do so. So I made a show of it, and instead I played video games. During that first year when I arrived back, those games were mostly, I think, and I'm really stretching my memory here, but I'm pretty sure it was PlanetSide 1 and World of Warcraft. PlanetSide 1 at this time had been out for 3 years, and it was starting to get pretty long in the tooth. Population was starting to go away. I think it was at this time that it was when all the US servers had merged into one, and I came back and played for a little while and actually linked up with Future Crew. That's my connection to Future Crew. I know Future Crew Deeg is a bit of a meme in the PlanetSide community, and that's where it originated from. I also played World of Warcraft, like I mentioned. I'm going to say more about that in a few minutes, though. Actually, not. I'm going to say it. Oh, okay. I'm going off book, so I'm confused. I left out one important thing here. It must be said that while I was at home, living with my parents, doing all this stuff that made me feel like a kid, feeling like I couldn't find a job and a way forward, and playing video games, that I was not happy. Okay? If that wasn't obvious, I'm just going to say it. But then, there's World of Warcraft. So I did pick back up where I left off eventually with World of Warcraft. I come back to it. Most games that I love are things that I dive into for a few months and then dive out and dive back in later. It's always been that way for me. And this is no exception. So sometime in either late 2007 or early 2008, I don't honestly remember when this exact timeline was, but I got back in on my 70 Warrior. I progressed through a few different guilds that were different stages of the raiding progression. At this time, Black Temple had been released, and Sunwell was still forthcoming. I eventually found a guild that had just finished progressing Black Temple, and I joined them as an off-tank playing my warrior. And they were a good, stable guild. Problems like all guilds, but, pretty stable. I ended up staying with them for the rest of my WoW retail career, as short as that would end up being. So in early 2008, I was playing World of Warcraft daily, progressing through Sunwell with those folks, and it was good fun. Okay, now here's the part I'm not super excited to share with y'all, but if I don't share it, this story is not going to work as well. So See how this goes. Any good story has a low point, right? You can already see my sort of slide here. Going from someone who's in college, working towards something, to someone who's given up on that, diving into games, living with his family. And it must be said that I was more fortunate than many in the opportunities that I had. But at the time, young Deeg felt stuck. I didn't know what to do. I was getting continuous pressure from my family to find a job. I didn't know where to look, and when I tried, it didn't work. So eventually, one day, the pressure got to be too much for me. And I lied. I told my family that I'd gotten a job working the night shift at a local gas station, which operated on a 24-hour basis. Every single night, after I'd woken up late in the day, gamed or whatever else I was doing, when it got to be bedtime for my family, I would make a big show of leaving for my shift. I would take one of the family cars out, park in a random parking lot in town, get out a nightlight and a book, and read for a few hours. Boy, I'm really not proud of this. Occasionally, a cop would stop me and tell me I couldn't stay there, so I'd relocate. Nothing ever dramatic ever happened about that. Thankfully, I'm a white dude in a white town, so, I didn't know how privileged I was at the time. After a couple of hours of reading, I would come back home. I would sneak back in the house. Make as little noise as possible, and stay up late gaming. And then I would go to bed when the sun rose and start it all again the next day. This worked out for a little while, but eventually my father found out. And when I think back on my memory of that confrontation, I cannot remember any of the words. I remember sitting on a couch next to my father in a chair. I know that we communicated about this, but when I think back on the memory, it's like all I can hear is like ringing in my ears, like that full-eared wool sock in the ear, like an explosion had just gone off. That's how I think about it in my memory. There was no punishment that resulted from this lie, but the waves of disappointment and the shame that I felt was overwhelming. For me, this was probably the low point of my life. At this point, I was 24 years old. I had no idea where my life was going. I had no clue what to do with myself. I felt like I coasted through my school years for the most part on an ability to perform well in the classroom and on tests. But then once I got into what felt like the real world, all of a sudden, all that my brilliance wasn't useful, was for naught. Compared to the ability to be disciplined and sustain an intention over time, momentary brilliance doesn't count for a lot. And I started to give up on the idea of ever being anything or anyone, and maybe I'm just going to work at menial jobs and play video games the rest of my life. And I even said as much to my parents out of frustration because I just didn't know. I didn't know. Who does? Anyway, life just kind of went on from that. The next thing I really remember was my 25th birthday, which would have been in the fall of 2008. So when that birthday came round, I was in a place where the idea of celebrating a birthday with my family felt like the most choking thing that could possibly happen. I couldn't bear the thought of it. I so badly wanted to individuate myself from my family, but I didn't know how. And my family responded, and all I did was I asked them is, can you please just give me a few bucks to go get myself some dinner and watch a movie? I didn't want to celebrate with my family. And they made us think about this, which I still think somewhat negatively on them for, but families are families. Anyway, that passed, and eventually it comes time to think about Christmas. My family has a very robust Christmas tradition, and we give a lot of, we like giving gifts to each other, and we usually plan these things a few months in advance. So when it came time for me to be asked what I wanted for Christmas, I made a very simple request. I said, "Don't give me any gifts. I don't want any gifts this year. All I want is a round trip, help with a round trip ticket to go visit my college friends who I left behind." My college friends at that time symbolized to me my closest connection to what I felt like was a real me. They knew me without the expectations and the pain. They saw me fail, of course. Like, they knew where I was at when I left. But I needed something to hang on to. I needed something to try. And that's what I tried. To my surprise, my family agreed. And I was lucky enough that I had a friend from college who had a spare room in his house and offered to let me use it to stay. All I had to figure out was the car situation. I actually can't remember if I borrowed a car from someone or if I rented a car, but I figured that out. But then it occurred to me. My failing out of college was no secret among my buddies at the time. No secret at all. I hadn't gone to class basically for my entire last semester. Okay. I was fat and miserable. And I couldn't bear looking like the same fat, miserable dude going to see them again after having last seen them a year and a half prior. I couldn't bear it. Again, that feeling of shame. So what did young Deeg do? I showed up at the gym. I had no idea what I was doing, but I know I had to do something. So I showed up one day. I told the guy at the desk I was going to come every single day. I bought a subscription, which my parents helped me pay for. They were happy to support this. The guy pointed out some machines to me, and I got to work. Every single day I showed up for 1 hour. I did something, a combination of cardio and resistance stuff, very simple stuff anyone can do. And when I started, I was the fat dude in the gym. I mean, I huffed and puffed, and I did my best. Whenever I got to a point where I kind of plateaued in my progression there, I would talk to the front desk guy, who I learned was the owner, and became my friend over time. And he'd show me something new to try. And that was great. I combined this daily gym habit then with 2 changes to my diet, which it must be said was shit. I had the diet of a 20-year-old. Growing up on Midwestern cooking. So I didn't do anything heroic with my diet. I didn't follow anyone's advice. I just did what seemed like it made sense to me, which was I mindfully moderated my portions. I decided how much I was going to eat, and I ate only that. And number 2, I tried not to eat fake food. And to me, fake food is like junk food. It's all the stuff you eat that you know isn't really food, you know? Overly processed stuff, things that like come out of plastic bags in grocery stores. I tried to eat as much real food as possible, and I was fortunate that my parents were interested in helping me do this and were willing to accommodate what I wanted from my food. And it worked. It fucking worked. I got on the plane, and when I arrived to visit my old college friends, they immediately noticed I looked a lot better than the last time that they saw me. And despite the fact that nothing had really changed in my life, this was like all I needed. This was such an important moment in young Deeg's life. I felt incredible. And out of what seemed like fear and unbearable shame, I found something that worked to me and still works to this day. Daily exercise, moderating portions, don't eat shit. And most importantly, when I came back from this trip, I kept doing all this stuff. And over the course of about a year and a half, I lost about 150 pounds. And a lot of the pictures you're about to see of me are from me at some of my lowest weights, which I would love to get back to someday. Love to. Zybet's asking, what state did I go to for college? I'm not going to say specifically. I'm not sure how much I want to dox myself. I will say it was a small private college in the Southeast United States. If you want to shoot me a note on Discord, Zybet, I can tell you where I went, in case you think we went to the same school or something. So yeah, that's the hard part of the talk. So then what happened next? Young Deeg is coming back from his trip. He's losing weight, but I'm not anywhere in life. I don't have a job. I'm not pursuing anything. I don't have a story to tell anyone, and my identity is still basically completely unformed. So, but I had gained a sense of confidence from this that made me realize the value of throwing myself at the wall and seeing what stuck. And I started saying yes to things that would get me out into the world, even if they made no fucking sense. Let's talk about a few of those examples. Number one, doing yard work for pay. Yep, I hated it. Even though I was losing weight, I was still overweight, and I had to huff and puff. But there are a bunch of people who went to my family's church who were old folks who needed help doing yard work, and I took them up on it, finally. Make myself some pocket change, which let me have a little bit more autonomy with my life and the things I chose to do. And getting a little bit of pocket change felt really great to me. What else? I mentioned before I was a choir boy growing up, right? Well, one of the invitations I got was to participate in the local barbershop chorus. What is barbershop music? Some of y'all know what barbershop music is, but if the rest of y'all don't know, you're in for a treat. Do yourself a favor, when you get a chance, just go to YouTube and look up barbershop music. Traditionally, it's an a cappella format sung in quartets, where you have a lead, a bass, a baritone, and a tenor voice. Traditionally male, but also there's female versions of this too, where they have the same relative voice parts, and it's a cappella music. If you've ever heard "Hello My Baby," that's traditionally a barbershop tune, to give you an example. And so I joined up with this local chapter of barbershop singers, and they were all geezers. They were pretty much all retirees. No one near my age, but it got me out of the house. It got me doing something I felt good about. And eventually, I got noticed by some folks in the local chapters, and they invited me to be one of the four cornerstone members of a new quartet that they wanted to form locally, just to do some gigs around town and practice the craft. And I got invited to join these gentlemen as their tenor. And here you can see us at a gig where we're serenading a lucky lady at her place of employment. I think we surprised her. Don't remember all the details. That was a fun experience. And it was me taking my unearned experience of being a choir boy growing up as a kid, which I had to thank my parents for, really. I think we all have these things in our life that we accrue to ourselves, but don't learn to value until one day like this. And I didn't learn to value my musical experience until this. But I decided to keep going with it. And eventually, this picture, man. Eventually, I hooked up with a local classical voice teacher that my mother was connected to. Because my mother was a church musician and she had a lot of connections around the area. And she was looking for voice students. My mom mentioned it to me and I gave her a call. And I decided to take voice lessons from this woman. She wasn't charging a lot because she was just getting started with it, but she was a person, again, with connections. And eventually, when she got involved with directing a local company of just people doing Pirates of Penzance, I decided to audition, and I got one of the roles. And here you can see me doing some random ass PR photos, where apparently I get to wield the telescope, while these other two gentlemen get to wield the swords. I don't know. I think that I come off best in looking at this photo. Just gonna put that out there. And I ended up performing in a few different shows with this kind of this opera company is what they call it itself. Also Oliver, where I had the role of the asshole cop. I can't think of his name. And this connection created another connection for me, which is I ended up auditioning for the role of a section leader at a local church, the biggest church in the area. And they needed section leaders for their choir. It wasn't, a super well-paying gig, but again, it was more money in my pocket. And it was a really cool experience to have some responsibility and get to sing some solos. And the shitty commute aside, I really, really value this experience. You'll probably know about me now that this musical experience doesn't actually have much of an impact on my day-to-day. I don't really do any of this music stuff anymore. I'm always interested in getting back into it at some point, but it's not a part of my daily life. And the reason I mention this is because I think we as gamers, and certainly me back then, tell ourselves a story of, it's kind of like when you're looking for a new MMO, right? When you're looking for a new MMO, you're looking for an experience that you can play forever. That's the fantasy, right? That's the dream. I want the new game that I'm going to invest in forever. And the idea of investing in an experience and being okay with it going away when it needs to is one that I think can feel somewhat frustrating when we're all searching for identity and searching for meaning as young people. And certainly this is the way I felt at that time. So, but for me, music, although it's not a part of my day-to-day in 2021, this musical experience, completely unbeknownst to me, ended up becoming very important in my life just a couple years later. I'm not going to tell that story today. I'm just going to mention it. Because this experience I did, just because I said yes, and just because I had some time to do it, and ended up opening doors for me that I would never have expected, that ended up being very important to me down the road. You just never know. Here's another case of you never know. Actually, it's in different order. Let's do this one first. So this blurry ass picture, you can see me here on the back left with the orange cap and the red jacket. This was my Bible study group. You may recall hearing me mention that I didn't consider myself to be a subscriber to the church at this point. I was not. But I was so needful of connections and of just human conversation that I said yes to an invitation to a Bible study group for young adults. And I showed up, and these are the people who I met there. I just told them honestly that I was not really, a believer at this point. I had passed through a certain experience, and but I was open-minded and liked discussing the lessons of the Bible and what we can all take away from it. And that was true. And these people accepted me for where I was at that time. And I ended up becoming really great friends with all these people. So great friends, actually, that we'd meet each other after Bible study lessons. We would go over to each other's places to watch things like The Office. And we all actually, at one point, later in the year, all piled into my parents' van and drove 30 hours nonstop from New England down to Florida to go to Disney together, where I got sunburned to hell. And there's a video of that somewhere, but I can't find it. These are all great friends, and they're not part of my life today, but they're friends I would never have met or made if I hadn't said yes to a Bible study group and the experiences I never would have had. So you just don't know where life's going to take you, and I certainly don't. These are people who, again, like the music thing, are not part of my life today. But they were very important to me then, and they could become important to me again in the future. You never know which way life's going to go. Speaking of which, there's this lovely picture. This is a picture I took from a rooftop in Boston. So one of the things I started saying yes to eventually was one of my old high school buddies who was living in Boston because he had went there for college. He's an MIT graduate. And he had been inviting me periodically to come down to Boston to visit him when he has parties, and I never really accepted it. I always felt too timid and shy. You know, I'm an introverted gamer. I don't go to parties. I cringe alone in my basement. But I said, fuck it. And I said, yeah, and I showed up. And for a few months, I would show up, 1-2 weekends a month to party at his place. And we'd have experiences like this, where the sun would be rising, and we'd go up on the rooftop and see something like this. That was a very good friend. And he gave me he was a really great reflection for me at that time. And a good indication, a good lesson to me of how valuable it can be to surround yourself with people who want the best for you, This friend was someone who wanted the best for me. And to this day, I don't know why he was so cool to me. He's a friend I love dearly. He was one of the people who presided, one of the few people I invited to my wedding in that part of my life. And he's the guy who encouraged me to eventually sign up for a dating site. That's right. 2008, young Deeg signed up for a dating site. And I had some really, really funny experiences come out of that. I, at one point, went on a date with a girl from my WoW guild. She was very polite to me. Let's put it that way. And eventually, actually not eventually at all, it happened almost immediately, I made contact across the globe with the woman who would eventually become my wife. And by the time I'd done all this, by the time I had said yes to all these things in my life, my WoW guild, along with me, had progressed through and cleared Sunwell Plateau. And it was 2009, and it was time for Wrath of the Lich King to come out. I played Wrath of the Lich King, of course, with this guild, and I played with them in the Substitute Next Ramus that came out. But I got to a point very quickly where I was too busy. I had too much other stuff going on that seemed interesting. And I was too burned out on years of World of Warcraft, so I stopped. The day Ulduar launched is the last day I played World of Warcraft retail for a decade. And that's the story of my burning crusade. Why did I talk through this? I don't know. I guess part of it is I don't want to forget it. You know? This is 14 years ago. It's starting to fade from my memory. I'm thankful I still have a few pictures left from the time, although fewer than I would like. But I've had the chance to talk to a lot of different gamers, man. And I think that one of the things that is the hardest to explain, the hardest to understand, is this. How do you go from being a rock bottom gamer to something else? And it's worth mentioning that, like, my life was not all hunky-dory. This is not a storybook ending for me. Like, this kicked off a whole new phase of my life with its own challenges, which I might go into someday. But this particular phase, during Burning Crusade, was transformative. I went from being someone who was directed through life by the forces that hovered above me. I did what my guidance counselor said. I did what my teachers said. I did what my parents said. And eventually I found another thing to say yes to, other than those authorities who never seemed to understand me well enough. And I started to learn the lessons I needed to learn to figure out who the fuck I was. Started to. Let me tell you what, I earned a lot more lessons after this. I had a lot more growing up to do in life, but that was my crusade. Jumped in when I mentioned Bible study group, yeah. Yeah, the Bible study thing is something I would never, like, I would never in 1,000 years have thought that was something I would do. But honestly, I just like, I gotta do something. And I think that one of the big tricks and that one of the big lessons from me that I learned from this, I'm saying this clumsily, I apologize, is to look around for the little invitations that we have, that I have in life. Sometimes when I feel stuck, I'm not giving enough credit to the little things around me that have offered me an open door, because I've disqualified them for some reason. Oh, I'm not a Bible studier. Oh, I don't want to sing with a bunch of geezers in barbershop. It doesn't sound fun. You use the powerful left side of your mind, which so many gamers have, to logic your way out of why this would be a good idea. But sometimes, man, you just gotta let the right side of your brain live. You gotta think with your action. Learn by doing. Even if the thing you're doing doesn't make sense. Sometimes doing something is just a lot better than doing nothing. And I tell you what, I've come back to gaming, and I've been interested in World of Warcraft a lot in the last year. But I think a lot about these little invitations. Young says you received a little invitation 2 weeks ago. Declined, thought about it, and accepted it. Nice. I hope it leads to pleasant, unexpected outcomes for you, Young. Now you and your friends group are going on a vacation together. Brilliant. That's amazing. All right. I think that's the talk. Yeah, that's all I have written down. I'm sorely tempted to continue the story, but that is the end of this chapter.